Hi, my name is Ria Mehta, and I'm the president of EmpowHer Club. At EmpowHer, our goal is to inspire and enable women in technology and various other fields. Our intention is to know successful women in their fields and learn from their journeys, challenges they've encountered, how they overcame them, and lessons learned along the way. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Miss Afsheen. She is a growth-minded professional with a passion for technology. She has years of experience working in technology companies, specifically Citi. So, having spearheaded transformative projects and navigated complex technological landscapes, Afsheen brings a wealth of experience and wisdom to the table. Her insights into the ever-evolving world of IT promise to enlighten and inspire us all. So, without further ado, let us delve into the fascinating journey and invaluable insights. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to the remarkable leader, Ms. Afsheen. Excuse me. Welcome. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so let's just get started with the questions. Starting off
Mhm.
strong, tell me about some of your personal experiences and reasons that motivated you to be a client relationship manager.
I think first and foremost, in terms of any sort of front end product led role, I believe is only enhanced and is truly a growth potential if you're able to interact and get to know very closely as to what the end client or the end consumer wants. So, in
Yeah.
that sense, having that direct access to the clients for whom you are creating, for whom you are distributing, for whom you're able to sort of enhance or go on a journey in terms of a product life cycle. I think that truly sort of drives me in terms of focusing in on that lens as opposed to only staying internal focused. And of course, bear in mind it's a journey. So it's not that you get to be client facing sort of from the get go. But that was always something that I wanted to do and I pursued it. And that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Like working with other people, like if that's something that you really enjoy, I think that's really great that that's what inspired you to become a client relationship manager. Moving more away from your personal experiences, let's talk about some other women in the profession. Have you drawn any inspiration from them? Tell us about someone who may have inspired you.
Yeah, lots of them actually. I'm so glad to say that that quintessential old myth that it used to be that, as if you don't find women in certain sort of professions or you don't find women in certain roles within, certain professions. I think, yeah, that's clearly out of the window. If anything, I think throughout my career, most of my leaders actually have been women. So as we speak, our current head of payments is a woman, a CEO is a woman, right? So that in itself is an example. But yes, lots of women have actually inspired me. They have taught me a lot. And I think it's great to sort of learn in my opinion, it's great to learn both the professional, the rational and the emotional, from women, which I think they happen to provide, all the three layers, if you may, in terms of your career. So yeah, absolutely. I've drawn a lot from lots of women together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really great. And then also, if you have the opportunity, you can also speak with them about like something in your career as well. I think that's great that you get to, I don't know, interact with other women within the same profession.
Mhm.
Talking more about yourself and your industry, what is something that you wish you had known earlier about women and work in your career?
Wow. So that's a tough one because there are so many things I think you sometimes wish you had known earlier. Um, Yeah, I think I wish I had known earlier that the idea of asking for something and going after it is so normal and it's totally okay. And it's not either gender led or it's not level led or it's not experience led. I wish I had known that earlier because this entire concept of, sort of go getter, I think comes with sometimes, not always, but it comes with some sort of negative connotation. And I think women tend to overthink it and sort of step back and sort of not go after it. I wish I had known this earlier because I think sometimes it takes a while for you to be able to ask, which is totally normal. It has nothing to do with perhaps the environment, but sometimes it has to do with how you process certain things. So I think I wish I had known this earlier and I would have asked for so many things before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. Previously, women have also talked about how like um, communicating with people and like asking for help is also something that can be difficult for them in the workplace. So yeah, I think like that's like, a kind of generic experience that a lot of women deal with. Um, how do you approach building relationships with your clients, specifically within the male-dominated industries?
I would say that building relationships is hard as is,
Yeah.
irrespective of which gender sort of dominates. But I look at it as okay, or at least something that I have used and I think seems to have worked for me so far. I think authenticity is the
Yes.
most important, characteristic that I would absolutely, signify. So I think the authenticity that, okay, look, I'm listening to you, I'm here, we will work on it together. In terms of expectations, we have to be transparent as to what cannot happen, and by when. So I think having that pragmatic approach as opposed to sometimes also trying too hard, right? Because I think you may do it and maybe it's great in the beginning, but it's not sustainable. So even the clients or people at the other end can catch on to it, right? That, oh my God, look, as much as it was great and they did it, as a favor or as a special treatment, this is not going to last, right? Because then you are eventually going to disappoint, your client or any other partner. So I think coming back to building relationships, I think authenticity, honesty, also being practical in terms of setting expectations, I would say earns you that respect and earns you that credibility. And then again, I always say this, that in terms of the flip side of that as well, because every relationship comes with challenges. So I always say that I think the other person always is okay for the bad news, but it's about the timing of it. So I think that for me is critically important, that, if you're timely, if you're honest, and if you're upfront, then even bad news is okay. Because again, you
Yeah.
tell them, you give them the comfort, right, of working on this together. So I think that's probably a few characteristics which I think perhaps, help you foster a good relationship. And then they are beyond just the transaction, or they are beyond just the career, or they are beyond just the role. So I would say these three.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like what you mentioned about like being transparent and all of that. I think that's something that I feel like you can take outside of like your workplace or anything with like any general relationship. I think transparency and like honesty is really just the way to go about it.
Hmm.
So, talking about COVID-19, it happened like 4 years ago, but the pandemic introduced like a plethora of challenges for client relationship managers. During COVID, many clients and team members were working remotely, so I'm sure establishing and maintaining strong relationships at that time would have been more challenging. So how would you say you adapted your approach to managing relationships, especially in your career, in response to the challenges presented by COVID-19?
Yeah, great question. In at least from my experience in particular, because I was and I still am in a global role, which means that even in your day to day, there is a lot that you have to deal with on virtual basis. So to be fair, I would say that in that sense, I had an advantage because you're already doing it. Although now you have to completely rely on it, and you have to now obviously take into consideration other externalities, right? Because in normal circumstances, although you're working virtually, but of course you always have an option, right, to travel, to sort of meet, etc. But you didn't. So just wanted to say that in terms of the extremity of the situation, at least for me, it was not as extreme because given the fact that you work with multiple geographies virtually, so you are sort of in the hang of it. But yes, a few other things that we had to really take into account and make sure that you're making it part of your day to day was a few things, right? You do regular check ins. You make sure that outside of the official conversations, you're able to perhaps, have 5 or 10 minutes
Yeah.
and focus on the personal as well, right? Three, sometimes it was as simple as because of course people were working from home, so you would have your pets or children or any other family member sort of become part of the screen, which is welcome. Sometimes it's as simple as, sharing or exchanging recipes. So the idea was to actually make a conscious effort to bring the personal in because we all were sort of, cooped up, and we all needed to sort of feel that there is a personal connection beyond um, the particular official conversation. So I think doing those practical things and being regular at it. So I think one thing that I learned through COVID and I think perhaps sustained us was the fact that you just don't do it in the first few weeks and forget about it. You make it a practice. And now, again, post COVID, you do that either in person or otherwise. But again, it's consistency, right? So it's not a one off, it's not specific to that particular month. So I think in that sense, and it comes back to my point, right? That we authentically did it. That's why it still stays. If we were not to be authentic, then of course it fizzles out and people see through it, right? So those were the few measures that we took specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, obviously it's just about building your relationship at the end of the day. So I like how you mentioned bringing in like family members or pets because that kind of shows like a more human-like connection, even though really I'm just talking to a screen right now. So I think that's a really great point that you made. During the pandemic, a lot of people had a lot of anxiety or uncertainty due to like any kind of job losses and whatever happened during that time. So knowing that, how did you navigate and address heightened levels of anxiety and uncertainty among your clients?
To be honest, it was tough, and everyone was feeling it at different levels at different times throughout, that period. So unfortunately, yeah, it was quite predominant. How did we deal with it? So I would say that it always came down to, again, the basics, right? To be honest, like sometimes you have to do it for yourself and do it for others as well, as to differentiate between what is controllable and what is uncontrollable. So I think from our perspective, we tried our best to, number one, again, foster the partnership, be there, and then focus on the controllable. From the uncontrollable perspective, again, it's hard, it's tough, but to be able to dissect that and to be able to sort of push that away helped with a lot of, anxiety management. The third is, and of course, right, in terms of, and that depends on the industry, that depends on the relationship that you have, with your clients, etc. So I think in certain instances, when you're looking at the scale of maybe the clients and the companies you're talking about, then you try, right, in terms
Yeah.
of what you can influence, right, to minimize, that anxiety. And then, of course, there were several measures that were taken by organizations as well that helped to foster confidence and to keep people sort of, at bay in terms of, hey, we're not going to take any actions for the next 6 months. So, just calm down, let's focus, let's be. So there were a lot of sort of collaboration, sort of notes and exchanges and emails, which also sort of helped. But yes, I think primarily just differentiating what is controllable versus uncontrollable, because everyone was facing it, right? So it wasn't personal. So you have to constantly remind your partners of the same. And I think that perhaps helps to sort of divide between who you are as a person versus who you are as a professional or a worker.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I also like how you mentioned that like a lot of companies took initiative for that as well, because I think that during at that time there was like a lot of anxiety and nervousness about the actual pandemic as well, even outside of professional life. So I think it's really nice to see how companies are also stepping up and taking charge.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, shifting away from the pandemic and more personal, how would you say you prioritize your self-care and well-being as a woman in a demanding role?
Uh, hmm. It's an everyday battle. There's no formula. Um, this is one area, at the cost of repeating myself, where consistency is key and it's the most difficult thing to achieve. So, yeah, I think regular breaks, at the same time, on a daily basis, trying to make time and do something which is outside of your work. Three, truly sort of, taking a checkpoint throughout the year to ask the question, am I on the right track? Am I doing the right thing? Do I want something different? What does sort of excite me personally? So these few things, again, consistently, not one-offs, not once a year, basically help you with that. But yes, I think simply put, on a week-to-week basis, I find two or three things to do on a weekly basis, which help me disengage with what the work is about, and at the same time they have to be about me outside of my work. But again, consistency and doing it regularly sort of helps make sure that you are, of course, part of work and work is part of you, but you are also above and beyond it. So again, consistent small things, and keep doing it, and finding that rhythm outside of work is probably the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great. It's really just about the balance at the end of the day. So I think that's really nice to just like find hobbies that you find interesting so that it's not like a burden to be able to do them, but when you do them, you kind of feel disassociated from your professional life. I think that's really great.
Mhm.
Moving on to our last but not least question, what is one thing you would tell young women who are just starting to work? This could be in your field or not in your field, and what is something you would like them to know?
Okay. For the younger lot, I think one thing to note, the way different industries are evolving, is that now finding a passion and expertise is even more important, because anything and everything now has a potential to become a career, which wasn't the case 15 to 20 years ago. So let's say from a universe of options perspective, they were limited, right? Now the
Yeah.
universe of options is actually so extensive that it's actually overwhelming. So the idea is to filter it out. The idea is to actually bring in even more focus than probably was warranted 30 years ago, and to be very particular about whatever you pursue in terms of passion, or maybe starting a role or exploring something. And obviously it's very self-driven, but I would think that one would pay attention to what is medium to long term versus what is short term, right? So I think
Yeah.
having that lens early on helps. And again, it's okay to change, it's okay to swap. In fact, now perhaps that's the new norm. But yeah, I think not to be sort of swayed away by too many options, being focused, and then also being convinced, right, to pursue it and see it through, as opposed to, again, you see the next shiny thing and you want to go after it. So I think that level of dedication is something I would recommend the younger people to sort of explore and sort of go after. And at the same time, I would say that having having an expert view, but also having sort of multiple skill set which can be leverageable across different industries, again, seems to be something of a success mark these days, because again, things will change and things change literally on monthly basis. So for you to have that flexibility, I think helps, because you can still keep the core, but with the flexibility, you can sort of sway into something else, which is slightly different, maybe not completely different from the get-go. So it just allows you to keep on expanding your experience, and just pool of skills and roles that you can absorb more. So I think these two perhaps is what I would recommend the younger people to look out for, and again create that differentiator based on that. So
Yeah, that makes sense. So that concludes our interview, our discussion, I should say. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to interview you, and it was wonderful having you.
thank you. Pleasure is mine.